Welcome back to Windows Programming in C#. The following will be our objectives. Number 1, to learn the basics of Windows desktop applications. 2, getting familiar with command controls and form design. Structure of the Windows application using data access objects. And number 4, some good programming practices and design. So let us learn by example. Let us look at how to design and develop a Windows Forms application. We will look at how to create menus and command controls, add event behavior, and follow naming convention and industry-wide good practices. Okay, let's get started by bringing up Visual Studio. Here we are at Visual Studio, File, New Project, and this time select Windows Forms application and say OK. So what Visual Studio does is it creates a skeleton application for you and gives you a form for you to start working on. Okay. So let us wait for the project to load. On your left is the form. The form is the one which is created by default by Visual Studio, and the name of the form is Form 1. Okay. So for every control you create, you can select the control and its properties are displayed in the right hand side or to your right hand side in the properties window. So we have form1.cs, which is the form created by default. Now let us change some of the properties of this form. So I select this form, form1, and I go down, I find the attribute called text. I want to change it from form1 to something like welcome. Okay, and then the name of the form is form1. I want to call it main form. Okay, so I have changed the name of the form form1 to main form. Okay, so every form has two components. One is the design perspective, where we create the UI design, and then the other perspective is the code. So let's change the file name also by selecting the form1.cs in the Solution Explorer. Click on rename and give this name as same as we rename the form, main form. This way your form and the code file stay in sync. We have main form.cs now. Okay, so coming back to the main form, go to the properties, and what we will do is in the Windows state we will change one property from normal to maximized. So whenever this form is run, it will run up in the maximized state. For example, let's run this quickly and see. Okay, so this form, the welcome form, which is the main form, takes up the entire screen. It runs in the maximized state. Okay. Now let's add some menu items to this form. Open up Toolbox and select the menu and toolbars. Select menu strip and drag it and drop it into your form. Okay, so your form has a menu now, and let's create the menu items. We'll say first is the file menu, and then there is a student menu. Okay, in file menu has the menu item called exit, which is a standard way to define a file menu item. Under student, let's say we add new student and view student. Two menu items, add new student and view student. Okay, now let's go to the file menu and select the file exit menu item. Open up the properties for the menu item called exit and change the name to something meaningful. MNU is a prefix we would use for all the menu items and we call it exit. Similarly, for the student, let's select the add new student and change the name to MNU add new student. Similarly, for the view, change the name to MNU view student. Okay, now let's save this form. Let us add 2 more forms to develop a screen to accept user input to save the student data and another form to view the saved data. Okay, select the project, right click it, say add new item and choose Windows form. Give the name as add student. Okay, so there's the add student form just come in and then select add new item, one more Windows form, and let's call it view student form. Okay, rename, let's make it consistent. We'll call add student as add student form. Okay, yes. So let's go to add student form.cs. Okay, and then the text is add student, change to add new student. Okay, and the Windows state is normal and the startup position will change it to center screen. Okay, save it. Similar to the view student form, the Windows state we will change it to normal. We'll keep it as normal, and the startup position will change it to center screen. And save. Okay. Now let's go back to the student to the main form and write some code on the menu item clicks. So on the student, we want to show the new student form. Double click it, so it opens the code window. Here what we do is we say add student form equal to new add student form, and we say form dot show. Okay, for the view student, what we do is again we double click it, so it opens the code window. We say view student form equal to new view student form. We say form dot show. Now on the exit menu item, we want to close the application. We'll say this dot close. So we'll close the current form. We'll close the application. So let's run this now and see. Here's the main form, which is in maximize state, and the menu items are file, exit, and student has add new student and view student. Okay, so let's click on add new student. It should bring up the add new student form. Okay, click on student and view student. It will bring up the view student form, right? And file, exit, closes the application. Okay, now let's go about and design the add student form. Select add student form, right click it and say view designer. So here drag and drop the form to your desired size, and let's go about adding the controls. Since this form will be used to accept student data, we will add controls that are apt for student user data input. For example, we'll have text boxes for name, admission number. To select a course, we'll have a drop-down list. We'll allow the user to select gender, which is either a male or a female. Ask them to use the list box to choose the hobbies, because a user can have more than one hobby, a student can have more than one hobby, and then use a checkbox to allow the user to select more than one languages that are applicable for a given student. So let's get started. Open up Toolbox and go to the common controls, select label, drag and drop it here. Okay, and this label we will change the text to name, and then we'll change the control name to LBL name. LBL is the shorthand prefix which will give for all the labels. Okay. Similarly, we want a label. We want the text box for the user to enter the name value. So go to Toolbox, select text box, drag and drop it on your form. Okay, and this text box we'll change the name to from text box 1 to txt_name. This naming convention, looking at text.txt.name, I know for sure this is a text control, and then it denotes the name. This kind of naming the controls makes it easy for us later in the code to refer to the value for a given control. Okay, we have name. Then let's say we want to add admission number. What I will do, I'll select these two controls, I will copy them and I will paste them again, and this name just copied, I would change it to from name to, select the label name and change it to admission number. Okay, and the label controls name would be LBLDMNO. So this, and then drag and drop it to your required position. Okay, then what we do is we want to add a drop down list for the courses. Go to again create a label, Control C, Control V, and this label change it to LBL courses, and then the text also change it to course. Okay, and then from the toolbox add, drag and drop a combo box. Okay. Next we want to enter the date of birth. So what we do is again add a label, and this label we change it to LBL date of birth. Okay, and then for the date of birth we want to use a date time picker. Select date time picker, drag and drop it here. So date time picker we change the name to DTP for date time picker and date of birth. Let's say we want to add some radio, but okay, let's change the name from name to date of birth. Date of birth. Okay. Let's say we want to add gender. Control C. What we do is Control V, add a new label. The label text would be gender, and we call it LBL gender. Gender is two options, so the ideal control for this is a radio button. So select radio button, drag and drop it here. One more radio button, drag and drop it here. So the first radio button, the text is change the text to male. Okay, and then second radio button, change the text to female. And it is always better to change the name to start with RB for radio button, female, and RB male. Okay, now let's say we want to add a checkbox, a number of checkboxes. Let us add some checkboxes for the different languages that the student knows. We call it LBL languages, and change the text to language. Okay, and go to the toolbox once again. Select the checkbox control, drag and drop it here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's arrange them now. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, checkbox 1, the text will call it English, and then the name would be CB for checkbox English. Similarly, 2, we would call it, let's say checkbox 2 is used for French, we'll say CB French, and then change the text also to French. Okay, checkbox 3 will use perhaps Spanish, and CB Spanish. Checkbox 4, that's if we want to denote Hindi, and we would give the name as CB Hindi. Okay, now after the user has entered all the data, this data has to be stored in the DB. So we will add one button for saving and one more button for cancelling the input. Okay, button 1 we'll call it save, CV, and the name and the prefix for button will be BTN save, and this would be text cancel, and the prefix for this would be BTN cancel. Let us write code for the cancel button. Select the cancel button, double click it, and we say open the code window. It opens the code window for the cancel click event. Here just say this dot close to close this particular form. Okay, so let's run this application to see how it looks. Student, add new student. Oh, this is the form we developed. Say cancel, closes the form. Now let's go to the view form. Select the view form, right click it and say view designer. So here on the view form you're going to show the data which is already stored. So let's use a control called data grid view. Select the data grid view, drag it and drop it on the form. Okay, and the data grid view has some properties like data source. We will set them later in the code. Change the name to view grid, for example, view grid. Okay, so that is more meaningful. Okay, here also add some buttons like button to edit the control, button 1 to remove, then one more button, cancel. Okay, this button is for update, so we call it btn update, and change the text accordingly as update. The second button is for remove. We will say then the name would change to btn remove. Third button would be to cancel the selection, so btn cancel, and the text you would change it to cancel. Select the form, and the form name is view student form, which is fine. The text is, we change the text to view student data. Save this and run the application. We have file, student having exit, we have student, we have file menu, we have file menu having exit, and then student, add new student. You can cancel this one, student, and view student. We can again cancel. Okay, select the cancel button, double click it. We say this dot close. Okay, and let's go back to the add student form and make some more changes so that it looks visually appealing. Click on the add student form, select from the Solution Explorer and click on the view designer. Now go to the toolbox and get the group box component called group box. Okay, so copy this group box, and then let's say we have two types of data here on the action form. One is mandatory and one is optional. So for the mandatory, what you do is we select this one, put it here. You want to group the controls together, right? So add a group box, okay, and then select it and say send to back. Okay, now the name of the group box, change the text to mandatory, and the group box name you can change it to GRP mandatory. Okay, and save this, run the application. Student, add new student. Yeah, it looks a little better. Student, view student, file, exit. So what we have done is we have created a skeleton for the application to accept use student data, to store the data, to view the data, and on the view data either edit the existing data or to remove the selected data. Okay, so what I would recommend you is to download the sample application from the portal under the lesson Windows programming and follow through with that. Okay, so let me close this application, close the solution, and open up the code which I downloaded from the portal. Okay, let us first look at the model. The model is the data which you're going to store in the database, right? Here we have a student as the model, and the student has name, admission number, course, date of birth is a data type. We have a gender. We have more than one hobbies, more than one languages. So we have denoted them using a string array for the hobbies and a string array for the languages. Right? Everything else is the same what we have seen so far. We have student class, we have private attributes and public properties. Since we are going to use file IO to store the student data and retrieve it back and not use RDBMS, we need to make this class as serializable. Now let's come to the data access component. The data access component is responsible for all the database operations. It is a one class or a group of classes that control the storage methods for a given object or entity. In this case, our class is called StudentDB. It has the following methods: get course list, get hobbies list. These two methods are used to populate the form, add new student form, okay, with the list of courses and list of hobbies. And then once the user selects the data and edits the data, adds the respective values for a student object, we need to save them in the database. So we have a method called save student data and another method to fetch the student data to show it on the view screen. So these four methods are the data access methods for the current application, and they are defined separately in a class, and this class is a data access component. A data access component has methods like get hobbies list. What this method does is, for now we have hard coded the list of hobbies like reading, listening to music, traveling and singing. These are the valid hobbies. So we created a list of strings, and from this method we return the string list. To save the student data, what we need is a file path. We open a stream to the file, use the binary formatter and just serialize the list of students. To fetch the students back, what we do is, on the same file we open a stream for reading and create a binary formatter, and on the binary formatter deserialize the string to whatever we had serialized earlier. These are our simple methods we have used in the data access component. We have made it simple so that it's easy to follow on the actual controls and not get lost in the database code. Okay. So let's go back to our example and look at the student class. The model is the student and has the name, admission number, course, date of birth, a gender, hobbies, more than one values, and language, more than one values. So a gender has only an either or option, either male or female. So we have used the radio button. In languages, we have more than one languages which are applicable to a student. So we have allowed the user to make the selection using checkboxes. For hobbies, again, a student can have more than one hobby. We allow the user to make multiple selections using a list box. So here is the student add form design view. We have name, admission number, course, and a combo box for the course, the date of birth, which is the date time picker, and then the gender, which is a male or a female, and then we have optional data with languages for English, Hindi, French, and Spanish, and hobby is a list box with a list of hobbies which can be selected. Then there's a save button and a cancel button. Okay. Now let's look at the student DB, which is the data access component. One important point to remember here is we have created the student DB under a folder called DB, and similar the student.cs is under a folder called model. You can create a folder in your current solution by selecting the project, right clicking it, and say add new folder. This way of organizing the code makes the code more readable and maintainable. Okay, so it's a matter of personal preference. I have chosen to create them under folders. The choice is yours, but I recommend them to use modularity whenever you can. Okay, so let us look at the data access component, the student db.cs. Here we have methods to get the course list, the hobbies list. Okay, these are the valid courses in the application for now, the valid hobbies in the application, how to save the student data, okay, and how to fetch the student data. So we use simple object serialization here. Now let's go back to the student add form and look at the save buttons functionality. In the button save click, what we've done is we have a validation here. If the user has not selected any course, we ask the user, we tell the user, please select the course, and then return. The messagebox.show method presents the message box to the user. And then if the user has entered all the data, from the controls we get the data as an object. Select the popular student from controls, right click it and go to definition. So we create a new student object. We know that txt name contains the name for the student. Put it under name. The ADM number contains the admission number. We store that in the admission number property. We have the DDL course, which contains the list of courses. We get the selected items value and put it under course. And the date of birth is the date time picker. We convert it and put it into date time field into the student object. Remember, since we have used good naming conventions, looking at text.name, we know it is the name value. Okay, so this way, following good programming practices while naming controls helps us in the long run. Then we look at the checkboxes. Look at the radio buttons. The radio button male is checked and female is unchecked. We set the gender as male, otherwise the gender is set as female. Similarly, we get the list of strings for the hobbies and then for the languages and add them to the appropriate properties on the student object, and we return the student object. Okay. So in the save click event, we do some validation first and then we get the student object from the controls. We fetch the existing data from the from the database and we ask the user, are you sure you want to save this? This is a confirmation we post to the user, and the user says OK, to the list of students we already have, we add the student and we save it in the database using the save student data method. And in the cancel button we just close this form. Okay, so let's run this method to see how it looks. Okay, this is just the message box we have put at the beginning, the form load event. So say file, okay, student, add new. Let's add a student Harry. Admission number is, I'm not sure, I think Harry must be there. Let's try Ron. Admission number is 124. Course must be BTech. Date of birth should be around some date of birth, 1980 perhaps. He's a male. He knows English, he knows French, Spanish, and his hobbies could be reading and listening to music. Multiple selections are done using by pressing the control key and then clicking, and then we say save. Now what happens is, in the save button we check for a validation. We check if the user has selected the course. If not, we just show a message to the user and return. Otherwise, we ask the confirmation of the user, do you want to save this data? And the user says okay. We read the student data from the database, add the student called Ron to the existing list of students and save it back into the database. We do the validation here. We get the student data from the control to object. We fetch the existing student data in the list of students, and there we add the current student also, which is Ron, and then we say save the student data. Okay. Now let's say we want to view the existing students. So let's head to the student view form. Select student view form, right click it and say view designer. Here we have the data grid view and we call it view grid. Okay, and then there are buttons edit, remove and cancel. In the form load of this form, what we do is we actually fetch the data from the database using the reload grid view method. So what this method does is, it fetches the students from the database, creates a new data table, okay, with the columns name, registration number, course, date of birth, gender, languages known and hobbies. Okay, and then for each of the students it fetched from the database, it does a rows.add. It adds each student as a row to the data table, and this data table is the source for the grid. It is as simple as that. Okay, fetch the students from the database, which is the file system for us now, create a data table, add the columns, and then set each student as a row in the data table. Once the data table is done, this data table now becomes the data source of the grid, and bingo, you have the view. But before that, we want to allow the user to make a selection. So for that purpose, we add one more extra column in the grid called a checkbox. Okay, so we create a data grid view checkbox column and insert it at position number 0. So your grid view, when you run this application and when you say student, view student data, it has the different students already in the database, plus there is an extra column which is inserted, which is a checkbox. This lets you to make some selection. Okay. Okay. Let's say now the user wants to edit a particular student. So let's go to the edit button. Double click it to open the code for the event, edit event. What we do here is we get the selected row, and from the selected row we build the student object from the grid row. Remember, the data is in the form of a data table now. From the data table, read each value from the column and build a student object. Once you have student object, you create the new add form, which is the form we used originally for adding, and we set the student data on that form, change the text on the form from add new form to update student data, and then show it as a dialog. Okay, and then once that form is closed, reload the grid view so that anything changed on the form, add form, is reflected back into the grid view. Okay, let's see it in action. Student, view student data. Okay, let's say I want to select Harry now. Okay, Harry, and I want to do edit. Now what happens is the data in this grid view is in the form of a row in a data table. I need to read the data table's row and populate it into a student object, number one. Then I need to create a new student form, set the student which you build from the grid row. The particular row in the data table which converted into student is now passed to the student form. We change the text from add new student to update student data, and then show it as a dialog. Once that form is closed, if any save is made, we reload the grid view so that the changes are reflected in the view screen. Okay, let's say we selected Harry and want to do edit. Now what happens is the row Harry is selected and its data is populated into student object. A new add student form is created, instance is created. The text of the form is changed to update student data, and it is shown as a dialog. It's a dialog. I can't click on anything else outside. Okay. Now Harry's data is now populated and ready for editing. It's the same form we have used, but now we have used it for editing. Let's say I want to take out listening to music. Okay, and I say update. Now the data views again reloaded. So Harry, his hobbies are only 2 now. Just to check. It's just 2 hobbies now, reading and traveling. So the data grid view has reloaded the changes from the edit form. Similarly, when you want to do a remove, what you do is you select the particular row and do a remove from here. The remove button functionality, we ask the user, are you sure you want to remove this data? We ask for a confirmation, and the user says okay. We remove that user from the list of students and persist it back using the save student data method. This is a very trivial implementation on the database. Let's not focus on it for now. Our focus is to understanding how to program using controls. Okay. And once we remove the student and the new data is saved minus the student which is removed, we reload the grid view so that that student is removed from the grid also. Remove. Are you sure you want to? I say okay. So what happens is it reads the list of students from the database one more time and it removes Harry. Okay, and then again reloads the grid view so that Harry is gone now. Cancel, closes this form, and finally I do an exit to exit this application. So let us look at the edit method in more detail now. So when you want to edit a student, we call the add student form and change the text to update student data. We also populate the student data for edit. Okay, so let's go to this method and see what is done here. So from the student object, we set the corresponding text fields. Again, just because we rename the text fields as txt name to denote the name, it is easy for us to make the association now. And depending on whether the gender is male or female, we make the particular radio button selected. Okay, this way our data is ready for editing. Because of the naming convention we followed, it is easy for us to populate the particular control using the student data. Now, the same method, the button save click, is used for saving as well as editing the data. And for the update functionality, what we do is we just change the implementation is very trivial. We again loop to the list of students, select the student which we wanted to modify, remove the current data there, and add the modified data as a new row there, and it is saved using the save student data method. So don't worry about this method, how we save it. It's very trivial. What we do is, if you wanted to remove Harry, update Harry, we loop to the list of students, okay, and we select Harry using the admission number. Okay, once we add the student called Harry, we remove that student and then insert the new student. The new student is again Harry, but with the modified values, and this is saved in the database. So next time you go to view, you see the modified value there. Okay, so this is a form of update which involves delete and insert. So that is all about this small application. Here's a summary of what you have seen so far. Create and design Windows applications using C#, getting familiar with the common controls, understanding how to layer the application, especially the data access layer, build a sample application that has all the functionalities of a full-fledged Windows desktop application, some industry-wide good practices with respect to naming controls and event handling. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. This lesson is going to be the foundation and the basis for you to develop Windows desktop applications. Take your time to go through this code, understand how it works, and make some improvements, and it's going to help you in the long run. We'll see you soon in the next class.